You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz for great radio. Get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
Welcome, fellow patriots. Get ready for an hour of unabashedly pro-American, pro-conservative, and pro-biblical principles. This is the Blake Johnson Program.
Well, hello America. Welcome to the Blake Johnson Program. Here once again. Hope you've enjoyed the weekend. We've got so much to talk about today, and I just want to say we are living in the craziest of times. We really truly are. I mean, just looking at the agenda of what I want to talk about today, it's just mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. So tomorrow is the State of the Union address. And, you know, this is obviously the annual address where the president comes out and talks about his successes of the year, the successes of the party, the agenda that they've gotten through, and, you know, the hopes and dreams for the future. And then, you know, the Democrats obviously will boo, or they'll just sit there and just stare with blank looks on their face. And the Republicans will cheer, and it's just a charade. I mean, it really is. Let's just be straight up about this whole thing. The State of the Union address is it's a total ruse, in my opinion, because all it is these politicians get together and, you know, one side acts celebratory towards, you know, their president who's of their party, and the other side, like I said, they'll either just sit there, not say anything, some might even boo, they'll wear pins of protest towards whatever the movement is that they are identifying themselves with, and then, where are we? You know, I feel like there's a lot of propaganda that goes on, and it's almost like the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and how, you know, these people just yuck it up and pat themselves on the back. And do you really take any of that seriously? I certainly don't. Now, I do believe that the president has many things to be proud of, to promote, to tout off as successful, because he has had, in terms of policy, a pretty successful first year in office. But that, I don't think, is the only thing that brings us together, that makes for a successful country. You have to look at it like this. When you're talking about whether or not we are successful as a country, if you're talking about whether or not we are moving in the right direction, you have to look beyond politics. You have to look beyond whatever policy is being passed, or in some cases jammed through. You have to look deeper into the heart and soul of America, into its citizens. Are we moving more towards a united country? I mean, we are, after all, called the United States of America. Are we united anymore? Do we share a common creed, a common belief that America is great because America is good? Do we believe in the Judeo-Christian values that have quite honestly made this country the way it is today? Well, not necessarily all in the ways it made it today. I mean, we've drifted in many aspects away from those principles, but that's the whole point, right? It's the whole point of what I'm talking about. So, the President of the United States, he can get up and he can say all these things about, look, we got a great Supreme Court justice. We've lowered taxes, we've cut regulations, we've brought in more jobs for Americans, and we've been able to persuade businesses overseas to come to America to start up companies here, and so on and so forth. And look, there are many things, like I said, to be proud of. But I don't just look at success with, a mind towards business or a mind towards, money or wealth or any of that. We are only truly successful if we as a people are successful. And success isn't just based on material possessions. It's not just based on material wealth. The divorce rate in America has gone through the roof over the past few decades. Abortion has gone up, especially in the black community. You look at church attendance, you look at how that's declined, you look at how many in my generation are drifting away from church, drifting away from God. You look at the progressive education in the school system and the rise in the socialist message, communism, Marxism, secular humanism, postmodernism. You look at all these things and how, the sexual message has just gone through the roof. The message of you can just do whatever you want, whatever feels good, you just do it. You just watch, whatever you watch on TV nowadays, most of it is filled with sex, with violence, with profanity. You're not going to find very many shows out there today that promote good, decent values that we can all unite around. And why is that? It's because we, as people, have drifted away from those values. We have instead gone towards things like secular humanism, towards moral relativism, and the idea that, well, whatever makes you feel good, whatever is your truth, as Oprah Winfrey said a few weeks ago, your truth is what matters. No, not your truth, the unequivocal truth. And that's just something that's been on my heart the past, many years, but especially this past week, thinking about the upcoming State of the Union address. Because you have the politicians that are going to say one thing. But honestly, I don't really care what they have to say. And I don't mean any disrespect towards the president, but I don't really care what he has to say in regards to the State of the Union. Not because I don't think his voice matters, but again, I'm looking deeper. I'm looking at, are we really moving in the right direction? I really don't think we are. And I don't think you need me to tell you that. I think you most likely feel the same way. And it saddens me. It really does. So, I'll try to watch some of that and maybe cover it next week. It's supposed to take place tomorrow, so obviously I won't be able to talk about it today. But I feel like it's going to be a fairly predictable event, a fairly predictable speech. And then you're going to have the Democrats come out and talk about the racism of the president and how harmful his policies have been towards the minorities, towards illegal aliens, and so on and so forth. And then you'll get the Republicans saying their talking points as well. You're just going to get a whole spiel of the same thing. The same basic thing. To me, I think we've got to move to a better place, a more principled place. And you're not going to get principles through politics. You're just not. So, anyway, like I said, I'll talk about that maybe next week, maybe, possibly. I don't know if I will or not. But It's at least something to get prepared for. In the meantime, there are a few other things going on that I wanted to address. DACA. Let's talk about DACA for just a moment. Just a moment. Can we please just, as conservatives, tell the truth? I don't care if it's a Republican or a Democrat in power. Amnesty is wrong. It is not the right path. It is not what our founding fathers had in mind. It is not the direction that they wanted us to go. But it seems like now the Republicans, instead of, holding to what I believed was their platform, now they sound just like the Democrats. Just a few weeks ago, the president said that he would form his position on DACA based on whatever it is that Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell brought to him. The establishment hacks in both the Democrat and the Republican parties. Whatever they brought to him, that would be his position. And it's really disappointing. But almost as disappointing as many on the right who railed against President Obama when he created DACA in the first place, unconstitutionally, by the way. We railed against it. In fact, one of the big reasons that President Trump became president is because of his stance on immigration, on border security, on DACA, on amnesty. I mean, he freaking took out Marco Rubio because he was part of the Gang of Eight, because he caved on amnesty. And now it looks like this president is doing the exact same thing. Just last week, he said he's willing to cut a deal. He's willing to accept DACA as long as he gets border security. But you're not going to get border security. How do I know this? Because we have been here before. We have been in this exact same place many times. We were here during the Reagan administration. We were here in part during the Bush administration and how he caved on immigration. We've been here multiple times through Democrat and Republican administrations. They say, hey, we're going to secure the border, but we've got to legalize these people because, well, it's not their fault that they're here. And we can't just separate them from their families, so we've got to bring them in. And we argue and we bicker. And we say, okay, fine, we'll go ahead and do this, but you've got to secure the border. And what happens? Well, the border doesn't get secure. In fact, not only does the border not get secure, but we keep coming here over and over and over again. Now we have another several 100,000 or million or however many it is that we now have to talk about because we didn't solve it in the past. I mean, it's like the analogy of running water in a bathtub or a sink. You don't get a bucket and just, keep on, throwing out the water that's in, the sink or the bathtub with running water. No, you first have to stop the running water. You turn the faucet off, and then you get out, the water that is taking up too much room. Now, that doesn't mean that we just deport every single person here. I mean, I understand the point that some on the left and the right make about children who didn't choose to come here but were brought here, and maybe we should show a little bit more leniency there. But we can't. I'm honestly at the point where I am no longer willing to talk about that until we secure the border first. Secure the border. Enforce existing immigration law. We don't need any more laws. Just enforce existing immigration law. Allow states to take control of their own borders as well. And don't stop states like Arizona from doing it. Remember that controversy back several years ago with, I think it was Governor Jan Brewer? Don't do that. Secure the border. Enforce existing immigration law. Enforce the law. And it's so frustrating. And here's why it's frustrating. If you're a person on the left, you might, well, what's your problem with amnesty? What's your problem with all this? Well, first of all, here's the definition of amnesty, and there's a point to this. Amnesty is the official pardon for people who have been convicted of political offenses. It's to reprieve someone. So if you've done something wrong, if you're granted amnesty, that means the slate is now clean. You're fine. Don't even worry about it anymore. Well, if you're granting amnesty to, I think the number now is 1.3, 1.6 million illegal aliens here? If you do that, what have you done? You've, for one thing, rewarded bad behavior by coming here illegally. But if you just stay there, then you clearly haven't shown that you believe in securing the border, that you believe in assimilation, and that you believe in law and order. Because if you have amnesty, then you're clearly going around what the law says, and you're saying, okay, well, we'll just look the other way this time. Well, no. If we want people to come here to proudly proclaim themselves to be American, then they have to be proud of something. How can you be proud of a country, of a nation, that doesn't enforce its own laws? I mean, and I get so frustrated, too, when I think of all the people who are trying to come here the right way, who have been waiting 10 freaking years to come here, and they look over and they see how many millions, how many hundreds of thousands of people come across our borders illegally, and then we just talk about granting them amnesty. That should not be the solution. The Republicans should not start at the quote-unquote negotiating table by giving the Democrats virtually everything they want. Because here's the thing. If they give them whatever they want, and they start there, then what are the Democrats going to do? You think they're really going to talk seriously about securing the border? When have they ever done that? It certainly hasn't been within the past 20 years, within the past decade especially. Why now? Because it's Donald Trump? Well, the Democrats hate Donald Trump. They'll make like they love him to get what they want, but as soon as they get what they want, screw you, Republicans. Screw you, President Trump. They don't care. I mean, this isn't rocket science. So why is the president doing this? I think it's because he wants to be liked. He's tired of all the negative press from the media, from the Democrats, from even some in his own party. He doesn't want to look like a racist. And I don't think he is a racist, but I don't think he's thick-skinned. I think the president is very thin-skinned. And he doesn't like criticism. I also have never truly believed that he was that he was as big of a hawk on immigration as he proclaimed himself to be. And that's not even as much of a knock on Trump as it is just people who run for a political office in general. It just goes the same way every single time. So, that's where we are right now. I mean, I don't predict that this is going to go in a positive direction, that all of a sudden we're going to get a secure border. I think this is ultimately going to end up in the same direction, at the same position as before. The Republicans will cave. They'll give us amnesty of some kind. We'll have an even harder time of getting people to assimilate here, not just immigrate here, but assimilate into our culture. And anyone who tries to do that will be deemed racist, bigoted. You get the picture. Every time. No backbone at all from these people. None. I'm going to take a break, come back on the Blake Johnson program. We've got a lot to discuss. Later on in the broadcast, my first guest on BJP, AJ Davis from Common Sense Radio. He's going to be joining me on the program. We're going to talk about an issue that he's been discussing on his own program related to healthcare in the state of Oregon and how it kind of relates to what else is going on in this country. So you don't want to miss that. My name is Blake Johnson, and this is the Blake Johnson program on the Lanterns Radio Network. So I read a pretty fascinating piece on National Review by David French. I would encourage you to check it out. It talks a lot about this this extremism that is prevalent in the Democratic Party, particularly when it comes to immigration and their shifts on marriage and things like that, and how it seems like the Democratic Party has dramatically changed in, it seems like a short period of time, but according to this piece, and I think he makes a great case, that it's not only the Democrats, but it's also some in the Republican and the conservative movement, but particularly with the Democratic Party, and he talks about why this is. You know, when you talk about immigration, let me throw a couple quotes at you and see if you can guess. See if you can guess which politician, or politicians in this case, said these quotes. Okay, here's the first quote. It says, "All Americans are rightly disturbed by the large numbers of illegal aliens entering our country. The jobs they hold might otherwise be held by citizens or legal immigrants. The public services they use impose burdens on our taxpayers." Okay, that's quote number one. Quote number two. Now, oh my gosh, I did not know this was something that was said, but if you have children, you may want to cover their ears because you're about to hear something that is racist. Or at least that's what it would be referred to as if it was, CNN or MSNBC or virtually anyone in the Democratic Party. But again, I ask, who said this? Quote, "When I see Mexican flags waving at pro-immigration demonstrations, I sometimes feel a flush of patriotic resentment. When I'm forced to use a translator to communicate with the guy fixing my car, I feel a sudden frustration." No, that was not Donald Trump. No, it certainly wasn't Ted Cruz, wasn't Ronald Reagan. In fact, it was former Presidents Bill Clinton and Barack Hussein Obama. Those are the ones who said those things. Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, not exactly people of old, of an ancient time that we barely remember. No, this is recent history, guys. Recent history. And this is part of that piece that I mentioned from David French. And, I mean, it's not just a sudden change. That's part of what this piece says, too. It's not just a sudden change. It just happened all of a sudden now the Democrats are pro-amnesty. They are anti-traditional marriage. They are pro-abortion, pro-murder, I'd say. It's not just this. It's not like this happened, in the middle of the night when we were all asleep and we wake up and we find out, oh my gosh, this is a completely different party now. It's in large part happened because the Democrats have been infected with very progressive, very active people on the ground. People who are activists who shape the culture, who shape the argument for the left. They have invaded the Democratic Party, and they have pressured them, very severely pressured them, to shift from being a party of traditional American values to a party of Marxists, communists, Leninists. You get the picture. And, and it says here, in the last 2 decades, we've witnessed remarkable, rapid democratic changes from tolerance to intolerance on critical political, cultural, and religious issues. In the 1990s, Bill Clinton used the phrase safe, legal, and rare to articulate the Democratic position on abortion. The 2006 Democratic takeover of the House was empowered in part by pro-life Democrats. Now there's an active debate as to whether pro-life Democrats even fit within the party's quote-unquote big tent. And the question of party support for a moderately pro-choice mayoral candidate in Omaha, Nebraska, sparked bitter infighting. Can you imagine a Democrat using the phrase safe, legal, and rare today? Especially the rare part? I don't think so. Now, why is this? When you look at the transformation on gay marriage, especially. Look at people like, Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. They used to be, supposedly, strongly for traditional marriage. Hillary Clinton famously saying, "I believe that marriage is the bond, sacred bond between a man and a woman." And Barack Obama said the exact same thing. Many other Democrats did as well. Now they're singing a completely different tune. Isn't that fantastic? So, to get to the nitty-gritty of this discussion, what do these things have in common? You talk about immigration, you talk about abortion, you talk about gay marriage. What do they have in common? They have race, gender, sexual orientation, aka identity politics. That's what these things have in common. Identity politics. The Democratic Party is driven by identity politics. And they are prone to use all the isms, racism, sexism, and they'll use homophobia. You're just a homophobe, you're a bigot, you're this, you're that, if you disagree with them on any of these issues. And he talks about how Cass Sunstein, in 1999, he wrote a paper in which he said that part of this shift comes from it comes from a groupthink. It comes from groups of people who think alike. They live in the same community. They all believe basically the same thing, and over time, that shifts towards more extremist views. It becomes more and more extreme as time goes on. That's not necessarily a democratic position. That's human nature. Groupthink leads to more extremism over time. And it further says ideological uniformity plus geographic concentration equals groupthink. And with groupthink comes a tendency towards extremism. There's no sign that any of these trends are slowing down. Too many Americans view you as a racist for even questioning whether there is an economic or cultural cost to large-scale, low-skill immigration. And we see that time and time again. And I just thought it was fascinating, really, to look at it, because, think about this. If you live in California, if you live in New York, or any of these other very liberal states, liberal communities, you have to believe this way. You have to believe these things. You have to believe, essentially, in sanctuary cities. You have to believe that if you're an illegal immigrant, then you are just as valid as a person who has been born and raised in the U.S. of A. And if you don't believe that there's nothing wrong with illegal immigration, well, then you're a bigot. You're a racist. You must just hate Mexicans. You must hate people who are different than you. The same with gay marriage. If you dare as a state, or if you dare as a church, decide that you don't want to marry this gay couple because it goes against your religious beliefs, then you are a homophobe. And you see it, like I said, more and more in the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is no longer the party of traditional American values, the values of hard work, patriotism, strong communities, strong families, none of these things. They haven't been that way for a very long time, but certainly not now. Now they are the party of big government, top-down, deep state tyranny. That's what they're all about. They don't care about any of the other things that they used to care about. And they will shame you, they will mock you, they will belittle you if you think any different. So, yeah, it's sickening. But we have got to get away from groupthink. We have got to hold to our principles, hold to our values, know what we believe individually and why we believe it, not just because someone else believes it, and not allow ourselves to go down this rabbit hole of thinking that because we believe this way, because others believe this way, that means we have to force you to believe the same. Back in a minute on the Blake Johnson Program.
You're listening to the Lanterns Radio Network. We are the network dedicated to empowering the individual, illuminating the truth, defending American exceptionalism, and inspiring future generations. Stay connected and get involved at lanterns.buzz. For great radio, get commentary and news of the day. Lanterns.buzz.
To the Blake Johnson Program on the Lanterns Radio Network. Joining me right now is AJ Davis from Common Sense Radio. He is the first guest I have ever had on this show. It's taken over 6 months, but I finally figured out how to have somebody else besides me on this program.
Hey, Blake, how are you, buddy? I'm glad to be the first guest on the Blake Johnson Program. I mean, who better to have than me? The colleague that follows you right after your 6 p.m. show on Mondays.
Yeah, I guess that's a fair way to start. We'll see if this actually works out, but it's pretty appropriate that the person following me happens to be the first guest on here. But yeah, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. There's a couple of things I want to get into, but let's go ahead and start with the most important thing, and that's something that you've actually talked about on your own radio program. This thing called Measure 101 in the state of Oregon. It's a ballot measure, and did you just vote on it? Tell me more about this. I know you've talked about it a lot on your program with your co-host. So tell me, what's this about, and how did the voting go down?
Okay, so what happened was there's a House Bill 2391 that back in the 2017 legislative session was a tax that was pushed by the state of Oregon Democrats. It was a bill that put 1.5% tax on people's health insurance. But the tricky thing about it was that unions, big corporations, and other special interest groups were exempt in the law. But the hospitals got a 1.5% tax that they could pass on to you, to me, to anyone that goes into the hospital. So what happened was a referendum went out. State Rep Julie Parrish, who I've had on this show many times, her and Dr. Cedric Hayden, who was a Medicaid dentist, got 90,000 Oregonians to sign a referendum to get it taken to the ballot so the voters could vote on it. And so what happened was it got hijacked, and it got put on a low election turnout in January. I mean, when you think, Blake, who has an election in January? Have you ever heard of something like that, in January. I mean, very special election, maybe for a senator or a governor. This was a ballot measure, 101. So
yeah, that is odd.
Yeah, it's very odd. So, I mean, the reason they did it, you look at it and everyone knows, is low voter turnout. And right now, currently, the election was last Monday, last Tuesday, stand corrected, and there was 39% of voter turnout statewide, and this was a statewide election. And the sad thing about it is the Yes campaign put $4 million against the No campaign. I was for no. I don't want any more taxes. I'm a fiscal conservative, a constitutionalist like yourself. $4 million from hospitals, from special interest groups, unions, poured into this, claiming that false narratives that really stuck with elderly people. They said 350 to 400,000 people or children will lose their health insurance, which is false because CHIP was approved for 6 more years last week. Had that happened, which I think decimated the chances of this passing, had that happened maybe a week or two earlier, the No campaign could have got, used their own words against them. So the No campaign raised $120,000 since I think it was September or October. So they were getting outspent 40-1 on this ballot measure. They brought out Jeff Merkley, who's a federal, Senator Merkley, who doesn't know who he is, he's the big guy, climate 100, we have to get to 100% renewable by 2050. So it was just absolutely insane, the attention that the Yes campaign was getting compared to the No. I mean, this wasn't a partisan issue. This was a big money issue, special interest that defeated. It ended up going 68-38 yes, and the legislature has a short session in February, so people can go on and push the legislature to pass some bills to get fiscally conservative here in the state of Oregon, but I don't see it happening because it's full of progressives. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, no, I completely understand. I mean, I was just looking here on this one site, opp.org, and it was talking about how it's like $320 million in taxes is what the approval amounted up to hospitals and certain health insurers to help pay for this plan. And I like how it says here on the website, if the voters had rejected Measure 101, the decision would have overturned the health care taxes, leaving lawmakers scrambling to fill a budget hole to ensure hundreds of thousands of low-income Oregonians didn't lose coverage. So basically saying if this didn't pass, there's going to be a lot of people losing their health coverage. But just the way you describe it, again, it just sounds like it's more, big government, special interests, things like that, just trying to get more and more control over healthcare, but just doing that and then making it look like, oh, no, we care about you, when in reality they care about their own pockets.
That's correct. So in the state of Oregon right now, we're 7 months into the 2-year biennium budget. The Medicaid, which this is what the Yes campaign was pushing, is 91% funded. There is a short session, like I said, starting February 1st. And 2 weeks ago, one of the legislators that was at one of the local forums to talk about Yes on 101 said in the forum that even if this measure fails, no one will lose their health insurance. So I thought that was pretty shocking that he's blatantly lying about it and going and telling constituents. So, I mean, like you said, 40-1 outspending. I mean, what do you expect to happen?
All right. I mean, I completely agree. And, I mean, it just goes to show that you give these progressives more and more control, and the people aren't going to pay attention. They aren't really going to dig through the weeds to find out the truth here. They're just going to listen to whatever's going out there on the surface throughout the media and the messaging and the people saying, "Oh, you're going to lose your health coverage." And, well, I don't want to lose my health coverage. And, when you're being outspent, like you said, 40-1, it gets harder and harder to give out that message of, wait, no, this isn't actually true. It honestly, it's like you said, it's no surprise that this is what happens.
Yeah. And so, like I said, after the election was last Tuesday, it passed. A local Clackamas County chair, Jim Bernard, went on to Facebook, and this is a guy that I come to find out this last week was talking about people should be treating each other with respect. Gets on, and Representative Julie Parrish is the main legislature that was pushing for a vote in the no campaign, and I support that 100%. Goes on to the Facebook on his Clackamas County chair, Jim Bernard, page and goes, "Screw you, Julie Parrish. You put Measure 101 on the ballot and you lost," which she didn't put on it. She got 90,000 citizens to help. And he continues to go on the same old argument that we had enough money if we cut budgets. Cut you from the legislature. Collect all the coupons to feed your family and pay your health care. And that's a reference is Representative State Julie Parrish used to be run a coupon company, and her Twitter handle is Hot Coupon Mama. And, I mean, this is an elected official that is stating this kind of stuff, and people from the Yes campaign and the No campaign are telling him, you need to resign because this is just absolutely absurd, the way that you're talking to someone, and you're an elected official.
Yeah, doesn't make you proud. Doesn't it make you proud of your representatives? I tell you, that it gets me in the perfect mood for this State of the Union address coming up. I believe it's tomorrow, and just knowing that many of our elected leaders, they care so much about the well-being of their constituents.
Oh gosh, yeah, the State of the Union. What a theatrical thing this has become year in and year out. I mean, you have local in the state of Oregon politicians like Earl whatever his name is. He's a crazy guy that wears the bow tie all the time, and he just looks like he's okay.
Hey, don't be digging at the bow tie, man.
This is Pete.
Don't be digging at the bow tie.
He looks like he's socially awkward. I'll put it that way.
Oh, okay.
And he is sending dreamers in his place to the State of the Union. The thing with the State of the Union is it's once a year in January where whatever party's in control drums up, "I'm not coming. You are a racist. You are a racist. You hate our president." It's a waste of time. Why are we even wasting funds, on something this meaningless?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. I mean, and why do we even need a State of the Union anymore? I mean, maybe you could argue it, decades past, sure, whatever. But now it's like all this it's just a big charade. I mean, now it seems like every year you have whichever side protesting something that the president's done. So they decide to wear these pins in protest of something. I don't know if they're going to do that this year. I would imagine so. I'd be surprised if the Democrats didn't try to wear some sort of Me Too pin or something like that. I don't know. It's it's hypocrisy on both sides, and it's like the White House Correspondents' Dinner. Why do we even have that? Why? It's just a show, and I gotta hand it to the president for skipping out on the dinner. So it makes me kind of wonder if he's going to do anything or say anything at this speech to kind of give it to the politicians. I don't know if he will, but I don't know. To me, I might watch pieces of it, but it's just going to be a lot of propaganda and a lot of stuff that's like, okay, this is.
I would rather read a book than watch the State of the Union, to be honest with you, every year. I mean, like I said, I got 3 kids that 2 of them are in almost full-time sports year-round, soccer, baseball, basketball. I got more important things to do than watch the State of the Union each year. But, Blake, I think you are skipping the most important news of the week.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Okay, I think that's what you're doing.
I can't be guilty.
Do you want me to fill your listeners in?
Enlighten us, please.
One of the 900 possible carcinogens on the World Health Organization list is coffee. There's a certain chemical that the World Health Organization is looking at that coffee can cause cancer. And in California, you're soon going to see Prop 65 signs on coffee. And if a judge declares coffee can cause cancer, every place that serves coffee will have that. I mean, did you catch that right there? If a judge declares, if a scientist. Exactly. How absurd is that? I mean, that's...
Well, I don't even drink coffee, so it's not going to hurt me any. I'm just going to die some other way, but but yeah, it's insane. It really is. You got to hand it to these people who are just taking more and more control, and it's just silly. It really is. But AJ, I want to thank you so much for being on the program. I know you got to go. I know you got a bunch of things to do today. But thank you for stopping by the program, and I do plan on having you back. That is, as long as you are still, able to do anything effective, which is in question. But that's a whole nother story. But thank you for being a part of the program, and
absolutely. Hey,
coming up next is your program along with Susan Swift on the show as well.
Hey, Blake, thanks for having me. Hope you have a good rest of your day, and talk to you soon, my friend.
All right, thanks, buddy. Take care. And we'll be right back after this on the Blake Johnson program. Stay tuned. Hello, America. Welcome back to the Blake Johnson program. Before we close out the show today, there's a couple things I wanted to talk about. First, I thought this was pretty interesting. This was from theblaze.com, and I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I suppose this would be something that may grab your attention. It definitely grabbed mine. But Seattle, the great city of Seattle, they've decided to do something that I think is a great model for the rest of the country on what not to do. They recently instituted a sugary drink tax earlier this month. Part of it was exposed. The results of it were exposed, especially, and it's not going well exactly. They've added a 1.75 cent increase per ounce tax on sugary drinks, making a 36-pack of soda at a Seattle Costco rise in price by 75%, and a 35-pack of Gatorade rose by similar levels. Now, of course, you have the city leaders saying that this tax will benefit the city, but of course, what do they know? When you talk to the actual business leaders and representatives, they say the tax will do nothing but hurt Seattle businesses, which is what it's doing. One of the leaders, I don't know how to pronounce his name, he runs a pizzeria on the outskirts of Seattle. He said that the tax puts her business at a severe disadvantage to businesses just down the street from her, because they're outside the city limits. So businesses outside the city limits are not subject to the sugary drink tax. So what does that mean? Well, that means customers, seeing how much it costs for them to buy a sugary drink, will just go to some place outside the city. And it's severely hurting businesses there. And the tax is only about 4 weeks old. So there are multiple leaders, multiple business owners who are calling on the city council to reverse these decisions because it's hurting their businesses. And this really doesn't surprise me. I mean, I tell you what, Seattle, they really have got things screwed up. I mean, this is the same place that recently put in a $15 minimum wage law, and that's hurting their businesses. People are either losing the amount of hours they can work per week, or they have to downsize the amount of workers because they can't afford it. It's just insane. But this goes to show what happens when leftists get in charge and put forward top-down, tyrannical, big government policies. It destroys the economy of the community. And we've seen this over and over again with places like Detroit, other places in, Washington, in California. You've seen, how crazy it is in California and how much is bankrupting that state. This is what happens. When you look at places like Texas and Florida and many states, other states down the south that are more conservative, more liberty-leaning, more free market capitalism-leaning, their states are doing very well. And that's because of freedom. That's because of the free market. That's because of small government. That's because of giving more power back to the people, back to the businesses, instead of to these bureaucrats who know nothing of how to run a business. So I thought that was fairly interesting. Okay, so I've only got a couple minutes left. I wanted to address something real quick, and I may get into it more next week, but this is really laid on my heart. This is completely unrelated to what I just talked about, but this has been something that's been going on with me for a while now, and it has to do with how we talk to each other. Most recently, this past week, I was in a conversation with one of my friends who is extremely liberal, very liberal, and she calls herself a Christian, but she is very, very pro-abortion. I personally don't think that's a thing. I don't think you can be a Christian and be for abortion, but maybe that's just me. I really don't think so. But we had a back and forth, a little passionate debate on this issue because I am very against abortion. I'm very pro-life, and she's very pro-abortion. But at the end of the conversation, despite all the debate that we had, we were still able to find a way to keep it cordial, to keep it respectful. And that's something that I've struggled with for a long time. I'm not someone who is normally that way. Like, if we were debating something like that, I am very no-nonsense, and if you disagree with me, then you're a terrible person. I've done that. But this kind of conversation, it spoke to me, because I think it's a kind of model that we need to adopt for the rest of society. I think one of the problems with our culture is the fact that we are not willing to have debates. We think that if we just avoid the issue, then we've solved the problem. Well, no, we haven't. But more importantly, we are so divided. We're so vitriolic. Our passions, our anger is boiling. It's bubbling up. And instead of just talking things out, we bury it. And I don't think that's a good recipe for the future. I really don't. We've got to find a way to disagree without being disagreeable. We've got to fight for our beliefs in the arena of ideas. And we can't be afraid to really talk things out. Doesn't mean we're going to agree, doesn't mean we're going to see eye to eye on things, but we have to find a way to not necessarily we have to find a way to be respectful, and that's hard. It's really hard, but I just wanted to leave on a positive note, on an encouraging note, because we are headed for very dark times. We are in very dark times, and the last thing we should do is be at each other's throats. Doesn't mean that we cave, doesn't mean that we compromise, but we've got to hash it out. We've got to make the argument, not avoid it. So anyway, that's just what I wanted to mention before I sign off here on the Blake Johnson program. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. It really does mean a lot to me that you take the time out of your day to listen to this show. I really do value that very, very much. So, with that, I'm going to send you off for the rest of the week. Enjoy it. Have a safe, pleasant week. Stay warm, depending on where you live. And take care. And God bless.